This is John Black, super chemist, talking about Christians being persecuted in third world countries. But when third world Muslims come over to first world countries, again, the Christians get persecuted.
First, in recent days, news has started to appear outside of Syria, exposing the scale of the atrocities that are being committed against Christian minorities following the overthrow of the Assad regime last December. The images are horrific. Men, women, the elderly and children all murdered in cold blood by Islamist terrorists, including the CHRlSTlANS, the HTS group, which is designated as a terrorist organisation here in Australia. This afternoon, my good friend 4BC radio host Gary Hargrave was able to speak to a Brisbane man who returned to Syria to bury his mother, who was one of those murdered. He has since had to flee to a safe country in order to speak out publicly about what is happening to Christians there.
A Brisbane bloke I know, and know well, has been directly affected. He's a real contributor to our local community, but he's in hiding right now. He's shocked by what's happened. You see, he had to rush from the safety of here in Brisbane to the murderous anarchy of Syria to bury his mother. He's witnessed this genocide. He's felt the hurt directly.
Now, accompanying this footage, which was sent to Gary, some of which I'll show you in a moment, is some truly shocking images. Understandably, this Australian-Syrian man wants to remain anonymous, but here's a little of what he had to say to Gary this afternoon.
Oh, it's a slaughter, mate. It's absolute slaughter. It's and everybody just silence. They have no one. They have no one. They're in the mercy of the hand of this. Unbelievable. This day after day, slaughtered every day. Children, women, men, old people. It's just indiscriminate. It's just unbelievable.
Now, these are heavily censored videos. You can understand why they were sent to Gary. Bodies on the streets. We're also sent videos of beheadings and footage of mass graves.
Now, people can't even get out. If you do, you just, they stop you and they say, what are you, a Christian? You're Alawite, you're who you are, and that's it, slaughter will happen.
As I said, horrific images that appear not to have made it to the attention of the United Nations or any other of the global bodies that purport to defend human rights. Joining me now to discuss this Credlin regular, the author, Ayaan Hirsi Ali. Ayaan, welcome to the program. I wish...
Yeah, the Fourth Reich, they are embracing Muslims, and the Third Reich used to embrace Christians. They've reversed it. But, as when it comes to the Jews, in any Reich, they hate the Jews.
Wish I had something better to discuss, but this is something that is not getting much attention amongst the Western media, so why not?
Why not is a very good question. First of all, obviously, the images you show and what's happening in Syria is shocking. But in a way, it's not shocking because 1 in 7 Christians is subjected to persecution across Muslim-majority countries. It's happening in Syria, as you say now, but also in Iraq, in Nigeria, in Kyrgyzstan, in Kazakhstan. And I mean, I really don't know why our Western leaders are silent. I suspect it is because they're afraid, because we have large numbers of Muslims living in most major Western countries. And another story that is not told, before it gets to the slitting of throats, radical Muslims begin by vandalizing churches. And an underreported story is the attacks on churches in France, in Britain, in Germany, Spain, Italy, Sweden.
UK.
And it escalates from there. So I am suspicious that it is because our leadership are really afraid that some of the radical Muslims on our soil will start doing here in Western countries what they're doing in Syria and in Iraq and in Nigeria and in other places.
Look, I made the point today at a Jewish gathering, standing up for anti-Semitism is the job of every Australian. But it's a particular job of Christians too, because once they come for the Jews, let me tell you, history shows the Christians are next. And what concerns me in all of this debate, and we can speak to the Western governments, they need to do and say more, but where are the international bodies? Where's the UN here? Where's all the human rights lobby groups? They're very silent too, Ayan.
Human rights has become a joke now. It is a good question to ask, where are these institutions? And the answer is that all of these institutions have been infiltrated by people who are beholden to the ideology of Islamism. They are the ones who pull the shots. There was a human rights body of the United Nations, and it's led by Iran and by countries like, at one time Libya was even a part of it. So the UN as an organization is a joke. When you say when you say they're going to come for Christians, they'll come for the Jews first and then for the Christians. They did come for the Christians. On July 26, 2016, a priest in France was preaching in the Normandy church, and two 19-year-old Muslims walked in and slit his throat. So we've had all what we call terrorist attacks, are basically attacks on Christians the way they see it. Even if you're secular, they still see it as attacks on Christianity. So I think there is a very suicidal attitude towards the presence of this problem from our political leaders, but I think more and more populations are getting alarmed.
Here in Australia too, we had a radicalised young person scream out Islamic chants and attempt to slit the throat, certainly stabbed an Australian Christian bishop. Now that's died in the headlines. I'm not even sure where those charges are up to. I'll ask the question and come back to my viewers tomorrow night, but it's certainly been a feature sadly here in Australia too. I've got to ask you about Ramadan. I made the point last night, it's coinciding this time around with Lent. We've seen the King and Queen of England, they've attended a restaurant for a Ramadan event. We've seen them host an iftar event at Windsor Castle, the first time a Muslim event's been held there to this scale in 1,000 years. Now, the King is the head of the Church of England. The UK Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, is supposed to support Judeo-Christian underpinnings of his own country. Both of those men did not acknowledge Ash Wednesday and the beginning of the Christian Lent. Why on earth are we in the West so embarrassed by our own culture?
I can't think of anything more wrong-headed than hosting the Ramadan at Windsor Castle. I'll tell you what Keir Starmer thinks this gesture is going to do. He thinks it's going to appease the Islamists, that it'll pull them towards peaceful coexistence. It's going to do the exact opposite. It's going to encourage Islamists and think, look, we're in Windsor Castle now, and the Allahu Akbar is ringing in the halls of Windsor Castle. And that is going to strengthen the resolve of Islamists to continue to proselytize, that they're going to take over Europe, that they're going to take over the West. And so I can't think of anything more wrong-headed than that. My advice to the King and to the Prime Minister and to all other Western leaders is A, to wake up, and B, to stand up for Christianity, for Christian morality, for Western values, and to make it crystal clear to the Islamists that they cannot do in the West what they're doing in Syria and in Iraq, etc. We should also tie it as a matter of policy to our foreign policy and development aid, that those countries where these things happen should get no trade or aid or relations from the West. That is how I would do it, but I'm not in charge.
They know exactly what they're doing. They want us to be fighting. That's why they keep giving rights to these illegal aliens. They give these rights to these Muslims, and yet the citizens don't even get those rights. You know what I mean? That's how you create racism or hate. You give one group more rights than the other group. It's that simple. And sooner or later, it doesn't matter how good and wholesome either group is. If one group has more rights, the other group is going to get pissed.
Already, many parts of Britain are increasingly unrecognisable. Here's Nottingham town centre. and sing a Christian hymn in parts of Britain, and hey, the police will be on to you.
Religion you're allowed to do anywhere.
No, miss, you're not allowed to sing church songs outside of church grounds, by the way.
You're not allowed to sing church songs outside of
church songs or church grounds. That's fine, that's fine.
She just said you're not allowed to sing church songs outside of church.
Our churches outside of church grounds, unless you have unless you are authorized by the church to do this kind of song.
This guy's called What Do You Meme? It's on YouTube. If you want to watch his whole thing, man.
Last weekend, 70 Christians were beheaded for their faith inside of a church, and you probably didn't hear about it until right now. We all remember the London terrorist attack that targeted Muslims, killing one man, and how it rightly dominated headlines. But when it comes to 70 Christians, the media is virtually silent. And this isn't just an oversight, it's part of a much bigger problem. A pattern that reveals something deeply disturbing about what's really happening in our world. And once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. To understand why this happened, we need to go back to the slow but steady rise of Islam in Congo. For most of its history, Congo was a Christian majority nation, thanks to the missionaries who built schools, hospitals, and churches in the late 19th century. But after independence in 1960, something changed. Islamic communities, once restricted, were now free to organize and expand, and this set the stage for the tragedy that happened last week. The group behind this massacre is known as the ADF, the Allied Democratic Forces, who are associated with ISIS and founded by this man, Jamil Makulu, a former Catholic and convert to Islam. So here's what happened. It was early in the morning of February 12th when the ADF struck. Armed militants stormed the homes of Christians, yelling for them to come outside. Terrified families woke to the sound of gunfire and screaming, and one by one, they were dragged from their homes at gunpoint and were kidnapped and forced to march with the militants. Now, this happened over the span of a few days as they gathered nearly 100 Christians and forced them to carry loot for them as they continued to gather more Christians and killing those along the way who couldn't physically endure. Now, all of this kept going on until eventually they arrived at a Protestant church in eastern Congo. Once inside, the Christians were tied up, tortured, and then one by one, sadly, they were beheaded. Mothers, fathers, and children all slaughtered inside of their own church. The bodies of over 70 victims, including women, children, and the elderly, were found inside the church the next day. Now, as tragic as the story is, it should have been international news, but chances are you hadn't even heard about it until now, and there's a growing sentiment among people who believe that the reason why is because the victims were Christians. Unfortunately, this isn't the first time that the media has ignored Christian persecution, which is why it's more important than ever to know when the news is being selectively reported.
Why is no one reporting this? Why does no one seem to care? If you were to replace 70 Congolese Christian with any other minority group, 70 Palestinians were beheaded, 70 people at a pride parade were beheaded. This would be the biggest news story of the decade. And yet this just happened and no one's reporting on it. And literally crickets.
Because these were Christians, Congolese Christians. The world just seems to shrug.
And it's not hard to see why people feel this way. I mean, compare the mainstream coverage of the Congo massacre to this story. In 2017, a man drove a van into a group of Muslims near the Finsbury Park Mosque in London, and in the attack, a 51-year-old man was tragically killed and 9 others were injured. This attack made global headlines. CNN, BBC, The Guardian, nearly every major outlet covered it extensively. The UK government even released an official statement condemning it, and politicians all around the world spoke out. But when it comes to not just one Christian, but 70 that were killed for their faith, well, apart from Fox News, at least at the time of this recording, there seems to be complete silence from the major media outlets. And this isn't just a one-time thing. Christians are being murdered for their faith all around the world, yet the media barely acknowledges terrorist attacks that target Christians. And even when they do, they never talk about the real cause driving virtually all of it. If you want to know why terrorism targeting Christians keeps happening, take a look at this map. This shows the places where Christians are the most persecuted and have a high risk of being killed for simply being Christian. Notice anything about these regions? If not, take a look at this map. This right here is a map of where the Muslim population is the highest. And here's what we
see how it's kind of similar there.
start to see a pattern.